Have you ever wondered how a daily journal can go from this to this? I'm Titleless Musings, and in this series, we will be exploring journaling, how to begin, my advice for you as somebody who has journaled for 4 years, and all the different things that come with the art of journaling. We'll discuss how to practice journaling, how to set up a journal, different pages you can add, and my best tips that I wish I had known when I started journaling. Hello and welcome to the third video in the Musings on Journaling series. I'm Titleless Musings, and in this video, I'll be sharing my discoveries as a daily journaler of almost 4 years. In today's video, I'll be going over tips and tricks that I've learned in my 4 years, as well as advice I wish I knew when I started journaling. You'll be able to watch me make a daily entry, as well as see specific examples from my own personal journals as to how I daily journal. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video on the topic, how did I begin daily journaling? For me, my daily journal journey began in the summer of 2020 in mid-July. Now, I had journaled before this many years prior, but I wasn't consistent and I lost the habit as I'd grown up. Deciding to pick up journaling again was definitely a weird thought for me. I only began because I saw a bunch of people online talking about starting quarantine journals and talking about journals from past world events, and I just thought it really sounded interesting. As a writer myself, I enjoy anything surrounding writing, so this definitely piqued my interest. Having a spare notebook and already collecting stationery helped solidify my decision to begin. Part of the reason I decided to start journaling was out of sheer boredom. Being in quarantine was not very exciting, so journaling gave me something to do and a way to pass the days. The other reason I began was trying to be more aware of my mental health. I spoke about this a lot with my family and friends at the time, that I just wanted to pay more attention to that, and journaling seemed like a good way to keep track of that from day to day. Another reason that I started journaling was because I was influenced by journal YouTubers and content creators, and I'm actually really glad that I was. Not only has it become a part of who I am now as a journal content creator, but it really helped influence my journals when I began. Seeing other people's journals challenged my own creativity, which then led me to wanting to keep journaling as a habit, to try and keep getting better and keep getting more and more creative. So I think I owe a lot of it to journal creators. Though I don't have specific examples from my 2020 journals to show you, I will put some pictures on screen now of my 2021 and my 2022 journal so you can kind of see how my journal process has evolved. But my very first entries are hilarious to look back on. They're very meta. I spoke a lot in the early days of my journal about what I thought journaling was going to be like. I thought it was going to be a habit that wouldn't stick and something that I would get bored of, and then my journal just became completely random. I pasted in things like mac and cheese box fronts or song lyrics printed on paper. It was just a really messy amalgamation of experiments. I was trying to find something that made me feel connected to what was otherwise just blank pieces of paper. Most of my first entries were very impersonal. They tended to revolve around what other people I knew were doing and what I saw other people online writing about. But as much as it seemed impersonal at the time, now that I'm looking back on it years later, I can appreciate the way I was clearly trying to form some identity within the pages. In the first two videos in this series, we've talked a lot about consistency and how to build journaling into a habit. So the question of how did I build it into a habit is very much the same as the advice I've been giving. I held myself to a very strict, I have to do this daily guideline. Being a creative writer, I knew that in order to start any creative process, you just have to get the discomfort out of the way first. Every day in the afternoon, I would sit and write about the day. And at the time, I wrote a lot about the pandemic because it was 2020 and there was nothing else to talk about. But I did that every single day. In all honesty, I can't tell you when it became a habit. I can just tell you that it stopped becoming forced and instead turned into something I was excited to do. I began to not feel like, oh, it's journaling time, and instead began to wait and be excited started to journal again. I would naturally just open my journal and write a few things down, maybe come back to it later. It wasn't a pressure or a rule that I put on myself, it was just sheer enjoyment. If I had to guess, I'd say it probably took me about a month, maybe 2, but then I became comfortable with journaling, and ever since then I've done it daily without even thinking about it. If there's one thing I wish I had changed about my journaling journey, I wish that I had started journaling earlier, and I'm sure a lot of other journalers would say the same thing. I didn't start journaling consistently until 2020, and I lived a lot of life up until that point. I wish that I had started earlier because there's a lot of things that had happened that I don't remember now how I was feeling at the time, but I think it would be really interesting if I did. There's also a lot of things I would have done differently, I think, if I had had a place to bounce ideas off myself and check in on myself. So that's really the biggest thing that I would change. The other thing I would change about my experience with journaling is I wish I hadn't allowed the sort of peer pressure of seeing other people's journals get to me. It's true that I was really influenced by other content creators that were doing journaling at the time, and I'm really glad that I was because it gave me a lot of good ideas, but it really impacted my journal style, and I think it's a little bit difficult to even see what I was going for early on. It's true that journal styles change over time, and my journal has always been representative of where I was at that point in life, but I think early on I really tried to be aesthetic and colorful and bright, and I had this idea that it had to be fancy. But in reality, I think that just impacted the way that I didn't really connect with my journal early on because it felt like I was just making other people's journals, not my own. Ever since I began journaling, I've thought of life as a movie, that everything in it is just a quick flash of a frame in the bigger picture of a movie. While the rise of social media and phones with cameras has certainly led to more people capturing these flashes, I think that these only show half the story. For instance, a TikTok of a concert certainly shows someone dancing their heart out or singing with their fellow fans, but it may not capture what they were thinking in that moment unless they actually write it out. For me, I look at journaling the very same way. The photos that I take and the videos I capture physically show a moment in time, but only my entries capture what I was really thinking while I was listening to a song, or who I was thinking about while watching a sunset, for example. Capturing these moments reminds me not just of what I was actually doing, but the details around me that a phone camera couldn't or wouldn't capture. Alongside my first point, I think that in the modern world, we all have the ability to leave a trace of ourselves on the world, whether that's something like filming content or being an actor or posting something online, or even artists that leave their art in the world. I read something, I can't remember where, but it said that remember today, all 8 billion people have lived a different day. And I couldn't help but wonder what it would look like to see today the way that others did. My journal allows me that ability to tell my story through my eyes and the things that I experience in my own shoes, and then pass that down one day if I want, or share that with the world. I think a lot of us are guilty of always trying to be that person who is there for everybody else, who is always a shoulder to cry on, or who is always the first line of support. And that's great and honorable and really wonderful. I know I enjoy looking out for others, but we don't really stop to think about the weight that leaves us carrying. Being able to journal has reminded me that I cannot care for others until I care for myself first. Putting myself first has made me prioritize my health, both mental and physical, my emotional state, the advice that I give, etc. Having a place to care for myself and work through everything has been invaluable in my self-care, and it allows me now to recognize when I cannot be a shoulder to cry on. You might be thinking that if you're daily journaling, you're only telling your story. And for the most part, that's going to be true. It's going to be about your daily life or the things that you enjoy and the things that you get up to. However, alongside telling your own story, you're probably telling other people's stories, even if you don't realize it. One of the things that I've started to do in my journal this year is pay more attention to the conversations in the world around me. Sometimes I'll be out running errands and I'll hear someone say something that just really strikes me, whether it's something that I can relate to or something I find funny, and I'll write a quick note in my phone, and then later on I'll come back and write it in my journal, so I'm inadvertently telling other people's stories. Alongside that, I'll also write about the people that impact my life, such as friends and family. I'll write down the things that they tell me, and I get to document moments that I spend with them. Even if no one else ever reads these journals besides me or whoever I decide to pass them down to one day, they're generational stories that may otherwise be lost to time. It's another thought that I really find beautiful, realizing that we are made of the people around us, and we are made of the way that they see the world differently from us. Before journaling, I never really looked back on the things I said or did. Whatever happened is what happened. What I said and did was what I said and did, and it was in the past. However, now I make it a point to journal about quite literally everything that happens to me or anything that I get involved in, which has opened me up to being more self-critical. I can recognize when I'm in the wrong and call myself out on that, but I can also recognize when I was justified and right, and where perhaps I let myself get hurt by not speaking up. With hindsight being 2020, writing about these things in my journal has taught me to grow as a person and has better prepared me for things that might come at me in the future. Similarly to analyzing my reactions and growing, I can critique myself constructively. Since I am writing about everything and I'm honest in my own journal, I can recognize when I've made some pretty bad decisions or said things that really shouldn't have been said. Before, I would beat myself up about it and let it destroy my self-confidence, but now that I journal through it, I can more accurately identify how and where I went wrong and then work to improve those parts of myself. Making a bad decision does not outright make me a bad person, and it's a lesson that I've learned through journaling and working to improve myself. Likely as a result of the things I've spoken about up to this point, I have a lot more confidence in myself. I've documented my highs and my lows so I can see where I've come from and to, and I understand how hard I work to get to where I want to go. Whenever I feel like I can't do something, I'll look back on the points in my journal where I've said that before, and I realize, hey, I can do this. Having positive moments to look back on and a physical way of proving that I can do something has all around boosted my confidence. When I say I'm physically healthier, it's because I'm holding myself accountable in my journal, and I'm specifically talking about actionable things that I can change. For instance, there was a time where I really struggled to stay hydrated. I'd ignore reminders I set for myself because I'd just be too busy to stop whatever I was doing, so I knew something had to change. In my journal, I made a water tracker where I'd get to color in a box for every glass of water I drank, and that made it fun. Since I'd make time for my journal, I'd see the water tracker, remember the joy I got when I color in a box, and I'd get up and get some water. Things like that and tracking other things such as exercise have made me hold myself more accountable to being a healthier version of myself. As I spoke about earlier in this video, before I can be an emotional sounding board for others, I need to have a place to do that for myself. Since I write so often about my feelings and emotions, particularly on how a certain person or situation is making me feel, I'm more mindful of how I'm feeling at any given time, and when I need to step back and take some time for myself to recalibrate. Being aware of when I am at my limit has made me care more for my mental health and has allowed me more grace when it comes to things like planning, as I know how much I can handle and I'm mindful of my limits. When I came into journaling, I thought all I would do is complain and focus on the negatives and bring myself down. And while I do have days where the negatives is all I'm writing about, I do find myself trying and succeeding to look at the brighter side. I make more spreads to capture moments and memories that mean a lot to me. I write about the simpler things in life that I find beautiful, and I realize that actually, there's a lot more positive things in my day than my brain may allow me to think. Though the prioritization of self-care is almost identical to my earlier points, I'm specifically talking here about physical things I do for myself. For example, if I'm starting to feel a bit anxious about something and I can see that in my entries, I know it's probably time to go take a break and unwind, maybe listen to some music. It helps me care more for myself and put my best self forward. Feeling physically better helps me feel mentally better, and recognizing those patterns in my journal allows me to care for myself before I get too deep in my feelings to get out. I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't use my phone more than I definitely should, especially since becoming a content creator. I think this is something we all face and struggle with, and it's going to take a lot more than just a journal to undo the scrolling habits that we've all built. However, I do feel that I've made a good start on that journey. Whenever I felt down or anxious before, I'd immediately reach for my phone under the guise that I was just going to distract myself. But then I'd turn to social media and I'd doom scroll, and sure enough, I'd feel a lot worse. Instead, I try to make sure I always have my journal with me. If I feel myself starting to decline, I grab from my journal and I write about it. Facing the problem head on and addressing what is making me feel bad or just why I feel so terrible has definitely lessened my doom scrolling. I find I often feel better because I'm not just distracting myself, I'm actually working to figure out what's wrong and how I can fix that. And that for me has done wonders for my mental health. This discovery could go in the mental health category as well, but I generally feel more at peace now that I've started journaling. My brain is always crammed with thoughts, and I'd forget things I wanted to do or say, and I often thought about so much at once that I would just completely shut down. Now that I journal, putting those thoughts on paper has really quieted my mind. My focus is better, I'm a better listener, and I generally feel more at peace with journaling than with any other hobby. As I said earlier, I still have my fair share of doom scrolling moments, but I have lessened them and learned to rechannel that energy or boredom into creativity and art. I've given you a few examples earlier in the video, but on screen now I'll pop up about 4 more examples of what I'm talking about. I enjoy making spreads in my journal for just about anything. When I get new appliances, I'll make a pretty page about the manual so I can reference the settings. If I've read a fun news article, I'll write it out with pretty colors and photos so I can remember it. Being more artistic and creative has led to me spending less time on my devices, and I truly think this will do wonders for my mental health in the long run, now that I don't feel so controlled by my phone. Wanting to put things in my journal has become a priority in life to me, but I can't put things in the journal if I'm not out and doing those things. I open myself up more to the opportunities that present themselves to me, or to activities and events that I want to do, knowing that my end goal is to make a spread about those things. Those become important memories, and it makes me excited to do more things. Since beginning journaling, my memory has definitely gotten better. Because I'm paying more attention to things in order to write them down, I tend to have an easier time remembering things than the people around me who don't journal. Being able to look back on big and important events in both my life and in world history is a huge benefit. I can remember and reread the way things led up to a certain event, or what I was feeling and thinking before an important thing happened. And of course, in the case of something negative like losing someone close to me, I'm able to remember that person fondly and read all about very specific and happy memories I was able to have with them. In my honest opinion, having the ability to look back and reread these journals is the best part about journaling. This is a topic that I touched on lightly earlier in the video, and I'm going to explore more in depth in the social media and journaling video in this series, but more important and more meaningful memory capturing is a benefit I've really been contemplating. With the rise of phones and social media, we are able to capture the world around us so quickly and instantly, and can capture so much of it. But I think we sacrifice living in the moment for the instant snap of a picture. Since I began journaling, I'm very much someone who lives in the moment and pays attention to what is going on around me. If I'm at an event, for example, I don't feel like I need to rip my phone out of my pocket immediately and film everything in order to capture a memory. Instead, I'll take pictures of the things that are really important and meaningful to me, and maybe I'll get 1 or 2 videos, but other than that, my phone stays in my pocket. I'm listening and hearing conversations that I'll write down later, or I'm remembering what it was like to see a landmark for the first time so I can document those feelings in my journal. Outside of that, I know that my eyes are the best camera and my pen will be the best memory keeper when I sit down to write about it later. When I I started journaling, I used to make myself write at specific times, mostly to make sure that I would journal at all. When I began, I only wrote at night, then only in the mornings, and now that it's just a normal part of my day, I journal whenever I feel like I have something to say. Sometimes I'll even journal on and off through the day, maybe write a bit in the morning about what I have to do that day, write at lunch about what I've completed, and then write at the end of the day at how I'm doing and what I've got going on tomorrow. I do not miss having a journal routine. Once you get into the thick of daily journaling, it becomes so normal that you don't forget to do it. Being able to journal when I need to or want to, instead of feeling like I just have to get it done or build the habit, has made this a more enjoyable experience for me. As journaling is a hobby that becomes so closely connected to you and your everyday life, it's important that it grows and adapts to your life as you grow and adapt to your life. For me personally, I've changed my journaling a lot over the years because my life situations have changed. One thing that we just spoke about is losing a routine. Now I just write whenever I have time. Some days I just don't have time in the morning, so I have to write at night, and other days it's reversed. I'm not so hard on myself about time because I know I'll get to it when I have time to. Another way that journaling has grown with me is spread layouts. Before, I used to put everything on a page and use a ton of decorations and photos and washi, and it was so maximalistic and very loud. Now, most of my entries are just text with some color from highlighters and page headers, or maybe 1 or 2 photos here and there, and that's what works for me now. When it comes to the question, will you ever stop daily journaling? I think everybody thinks about this question, and I also think the obvious answer is yes. There will be a point in my life where I will just write my last entry, whether that be due to something like health or old age, something like that. I think that the more prominent question is, do I ever want to stop journaling daily? And my answer is no. I hope my life never gets to the point that I lose what I have with my journals. Of course, I may not have the time to do it as often, but the idea of not getting to journal daily is hard to grasp. I would and have taken journal breaks due to things like health, mental things, etc. But no, I don't ever want to stop journaling until I am physically no longer able to. For the last section in this video, I want to talk about something that may be on your mind, and that is, how do I track my thoughts in a daily journal? This is a discovery that I've made over the years of journaling, and it has to do with the fact that daily journaling typically has a lot of text, there's a lot to search through, it's not always as cut and dry as, say, a bullet journal. My first bit of advice is to highlight things on your page. If I've written something on a page and I have the realization that I'm going to need to come back to it later, I will highlight it. The color will then stand out to me because I write mostly with black ink, so I know when I'm flipping through the journal later on, I'll be caught by the color and can come back to what I need. Another really easy way to track thoughts is using a table of contents. My journal comes with a table of contents, but I would have made my own if it didn't. On the table of contents, I'll track mostly monthly pages, and I'll title it something like Hello August, page 9, for example. I'll also track special spreads, things such as birthdays or events, and I'll write down page numbers that contain things I want to remember or return to. Lastly, in my journal, I'll use a highlighted line to write the time that I'm journaling on. So, for example, I'll draw a blue line across the page and write something like 11:45 a.m. on it. If I come back to the journal to write more on the same day, but a couple hours on, say in the afternoon, I'll add another blue line under what I had already written and write 2:45 p.m. This helps me track my thoughts because I'll often write something down in the morning that I need for the afternoon, and I can just go back to the first blue line and I'll only have to read a little bit of text. I'll also use paragraphs to differentiate between my thoughts. As with any type of writing, this breaks up a wall of text and makes it easier if I'm trying to remember a thought I had. I can just find the paragraph and then find the information that I need from there. As we close out video 3, I want to remind you that these are simply discoveries that I have made in my 4 years of journaling. These can and will differ from person to person, and something I say may not resonate with you, and that's totally okay. The brilliant thing about journaling is that you'll grow and learn things that work and don't work for you, and these can be completely different from anybody else. The important thing is that you're journaling and discovering whether or not that is something that can change your life. It's totally down to you and the way you choose to do it, but I hope that maybe my tips have helped aid in your journey. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. Please do consider liking and subscribing to stay tuned with the series, and feel free to drop your questions or comments below. I'll be adding questions to upcoming videos to help you get better acquainted with daily journaling. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.